When we were looking at the lineup for the Pacific Dawn and looking at what would fit with the current shows that are already on there, one thing that really stood out to us was the need to create something different, but something really funny.
It's different to other shows that we've done.
It's a unique look at pop culture.
It's definitely out of the box.
Fast-paced. The show's mental, but it's such a good laugh.
Even though it is very funny, I feel like there is an underlying, really emotional aspect of it.
It's a rapid-fire entertainment.
Really short, quick scenes.
It's a bit of a ride. You hang on, you get off, and you'll feel entertained, thoroughly entertained, I would expect.
It was really important to sort of look for the type of creatives that could really sort of think outside the box.
So Mandy Liddell came on board.
So when he said he wanted to do a bit more out of the box, a little bit more funny, light, happy, I was up for the challenge. I knew that straight away that would be difficult because there's not a lot of structure in that kind of thing. So it's a big call, but I was excited.
Philip Philo came on board as a musical director.
You know, he's the sort of guy that, or apart from the fact that he loves the musical challenge, he really sort of thinks of musical ideas that you wouldn't think of. And for this type of show, we really needed somebody like that.
I always have the best time working with the team, so I was up for it.
Graham Gillies worked on the show. He concepted the show as well as producing it. Brett Clark from our Grey Boy office, he designed all the small props, as well as designing all the largest set pieces for the show. And then my role on the show was assisting sort of producing it and also designing all the LED content for the show. Graham, Mandy, Phil and I sat in a room in the Gold Coast for about 3 days.
The brainstorming session, it can take you off in all sorts of different tangents.
You basically have to be fearless. No idea is a bad idea. Not being afraid to just say, what if we did this?
When I look back at that original brainstorm, what we actually achieved and our end result was great because we came up with a lot of things that actually are in the show.
We're able to sort of pinpoint some great moments, some really key moments that were not only funny and interesting, but also had a theatrical resonance to them. A show that really sits in this sort of random, crazy style meant that the approach to choreography and to direction for this show is really different.
With this particular one, I would definitely have inspiration for chunks of things. And then I think later, much later in the process, that's when all the little niggly bits and pieces that link all the things together, that's when they come into play. It's not like you start from the beginning and you kind of get to the halfway and we're going, cool, we've got the first half done.
It was necessary because of the style of show it is to be tweaking it along the way.
And I think that kind of timeline actually adds to the excitement and the spontaneity and it creates like an atmosphere where everyone pulls together and creates something. And I think that's part of what the beauty of this show is as well.
Mandy tends to sort of work on things in stages. By doing that, you're sort of sporadically making decisions about, the whole overall design of the show. You're making those sort of on the fly.
Choosing the music for the show was very much, I believe, a collaborative process.
Firstly, we had to really sit down and think about who our audience were, what kind of music do they like, what are they going to respond to.
But also finding music that sort of sat in the situational comedy that we were trying to make.
I would present ideas to the team based on our discussions, and then we'd kind of collaboratively make all the final choices. The show itself, musically speaking, is made up of very, very different segments. One segment doesn't relate to the other musically necessarily.
I think it was a huge task arranging this show just because we jump around so much in style and content.
With this show, we did everything really in a 5-week span. So all the music was arranged and produced in about 2.5 weeks. Vocals were recorded in 3 days. All the dialogue was recorded in a couple of days. And the show was mixed in about a week.
I think this show has a lot more props than we've ever actually used in any other production show that we've done for P&O.
I think by the time we got on board, I think there was 90 props in the show. As Mandy and Graham sort of fleshed out more of the scenes, the list just sort of grew larger and larger.
Brett, Brett, is it okay if we have 10 witches' hats? And he'd be like, sure, honey, no worries. There'd be 10 witches' hats there tomorrow.
The weird and wacky wonderful items such as trees and park benches,
There were dogs on some little platforms that had wheels on them and little fringing around the side.
champagne glasses.
Stop signs.
We have whips and we've got cowboy hats.
There were orange life jackets.
Forrest Gump park bench and chocolates.
There was a heap of old sort of retro telephones.
Boxes and suitcases.
There was an Oscar statue.
It was also quite challenging to try and find all of these items in the short amount of time that we actually did have to put this show together.
Designing the screens for this show was a really interesting process for me. Early on, there were some specific scenes that I knew straight away what I wanted to do. For instance, there was the scene sort of later on in the show, and it's set in a really high-end hotel to be sort of all black and white with sort of mod art deco. And there was another scene where we set it in a park, like a Central Park. Katy Perry, pink colours, and then sort of as the song progressed, a thunderstorm would roll in and it would sort of get dark and moody and grey, and then by the end of the song, there'd be a snowstorm. A lot of the rest of the show, I sort of had to hold back. I think in the end it was more important to sort of wait and see what Mandy had created in that room with a choreography and a direction, so that I knew my design ideas wouldn't clash or wouldn't be wrong. I probably had about 3.5 weeks to really sort of knuckle down and sort of push out a lot of design work. So for me, it was a really crazy process. I think the key to designing sort of the LED content for the shows we produce is to create designs that enhance the look of the show without distracting the audience. What you're really aiming to do is create sort of environments, and that was really, really important in the show, and make the stars of the show, the cast, the ideas and the comedy that we were pushing across, and also the great lighting for this show as well.
So when you're putting a new show on, it's really important that the cast that turn up on that first day of rehearsal are right.
For a show like this, wow, it's hard to cast. You're really looking for people that are triple threats.
And I think this cast really delivered on an acting front as well.
I think the great thing about this cast was their ability to just jump in, make fools of themselves and try stuff.
The freedom to be creative, the freedom to input our ideas.
I loved the rehearsal period. Like I said before, I really enjoyed the fact that it was made on us.
It was really interesting because she created the space in the studio that really felt like we could be ourselves. She kind of gave us this area of freedom to just express ourselves from within as opposed to telling us what to do.
She has such an intense and specific vision. I don't want her to change her vision based on like what I'm bringing.
She would always come into rehearsals every day with like fresh ideas, new ideas, and like we all just fell in love with her straight away. And she was such a fantastic person to be around.
Comedy is a tough thing. I think the fact that it's all quick, it's rapid fire, there's no 10-minute setup for that big sight gag. If you didn't laugh or smile at that, well, who cares? 5 seconds later, we're on to that next moment.
I think the smartest thing we did with this show was write it in a way that the situational comedy was what was funny. We weren't asking cast members necessarily to be as funny as a stand-up comedian.
The biggest challenge with that is appealing to the audience, making it work within the show, and also setting and creating situations that casts can recreate.
It has an appearance that is significantly different to the other productions that we've done.
To strip it back, to have the performers all in black.
I like the idea that the costumes were not a distraction or were not a key feature.
They weren't dancers performing on a stage, they weren't singers performing on a stage, they were like a team. And with the style of the show, it's important that they looked relaxed and they looked like they were having a good time, because then the audience, they're halfway there, they understand the concept. We didn't have a name of the show for ages, which is kind of rock and roll. I quite like that. It's very cool.
I think the first title I wrote down for the show title was Linear.
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 Graham's original concept was sort of related to lines, straight lines.
And like things going off in straight lines and all of this, quite a neutral kind of name.
As the show progressed more and more and the ideas changed, I think the second title for the show was I heart LOL.
I love LOL.
I love LOL.
I heart LOL.
We were going down a pop culture kind of avenue, so we all loved the I love New York sign, and so just visually something really that popped. And
We got rid of that. We came up with something entirely different again.
From that, as the show then moved forward and took different turns throughout its creative process, it then became Believer.
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 That show title was inspired by one of the songs in the show, but more ideas evolved.
Pretty well into the 11th hour, or approaching the 11th hour. It was actually Brett Clark, I think I'm right to say, who came up with the idea of the X.
The X that we used in the design look for the show.
On the costumes and on some of the props and some of the scenic elements, we had this X.
The word eccentric popped into my head.
I think eccentric is so perfect for this show.
Suddenly you hear it and it's spoken by somebody and you go, oh yeah, that's it.
And then it just kind of fell into place. Everybody loved the idea.
I think eccentricity talks to something being a little bit left of centre, but being also quite brilliant. And I think that's what our show is.
The install of any production show on a cruise that's got passengers on it, that's a working cruise, is always, a really, really tricky thing.
We only have the Marquee Theatre for a certain period of time throughout the day because it is a working ship.
Get all the lighting done. You've got to get the cast in costume. It's the first time that you're jumping on that set, or it's the first time you're using that prop for real. Sometimes the first time the cast have been on mic. So fitting all that in logistically, it's a real challenge.
whilst it was a tough install, we only had little pockets of time. The cast were performing already on board with other shows, so they worked so hard.
Thankfully, the team was so fantastic that we kind of already had our own shorthand. We knew how to work around just the little obstacles, and I think the outcome in the end, considering what we were working with, was really sensational.
When you've seen the show run for 4 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, in the studios, in the rehearsal studios, and then in the space, in the theatre on board, you actually forget that it's going to feel so different because people are going to be laughing there.
The first time we did it for the audience, they were so loud.
The spectrum of laughter is what we're going for with this show.
I think that's what pulls it all together. Like, we weren't sure what the audience reaction was going to be from it.
I had a lady come up to me on opening night and said how much she'd enjoyed all of the shows, but especially this one.
And the energy of the audience is so easy to feed off of with this show. Like, you need that in the show with all the comedy in it and all, you need that laugh.
I watched the premiere and I was laughing. Like, I've seen it all before. I was laughing. I really enjoy it. I think we did the things that we wanted to do.
I'm proud of Eccentric. I think it's a great production. Very, very proud to have the Grey Boy name on it.
I think the audience are going to love this particular show.
I think it's edgy. I think it's really funny. I think it's very contemporary. And it's exactly what we set out to do from the start.